How did it get to that? George Armstrong Custer was born in Ohio. He spent part of his youth in the home of his half-sister and brother-in-law in Monroe, Michigan. He was given the nickname Audie as he was having trouble saying Armstrong. After graduating, he taught at school for a while before enrolling in the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Custer was frequently in trouble and accumulated 726 demerits. That's one of the worst records in the Academy's history. That behavior earned him guard duty on most Saturdays.
Behave.
While he was there, he was court-martialed for not stopping a fight between two cadets. He graduated last in his class in June 1861. That's right, he was 34th out of 34. It's possibly because he seemed to enjoy pranks more than his studies. However, as the Civil War broke out, the Union needed more junior officers, and Custer entered the Army as a second lieutenant. He saw his first action in the First Battle of Bull Run. Custer became known as a risk-taker early in the war. During the Peninsula Campaign, General McClellan and his staff wanted to cross the Chickahominy River. Custer overheard General John Barnard mutter, "I wish I knew how deep it is." Custer took action and promptly rode his horse out to the middle of the river. He turned to the astonished officers and shouted triumphantly, "McClellan, that's how deep it is, General," just to let everybody know it was safe to pass. That single act gave him fame among the important high-ranking officers. This caught the eye of Major General George McClellan, the commander of the Union Army of the Potomac. Custer joined that important officer's staff and developed contacts with many senior commanders. In 1863, at the young age of 23, he became a brigadier general of the U.S. Volunteers, leading the Michigan Cavalry Brigade. He was now known as the Boy General. Throughout the war, he distinguished himself as fearless, aggressive, and ostentatious. He personalized his uniform, complete with a red cravat. He was successful in gaining respect of his men with his willingness to lead attacks from the front rather than the rear. George Custer was considered to be a lucky man. He had at least 11 horses shot out from underneath him. One example was when he was at Hunterstown, Pennsylvania. They found Jeb Stuart's cavalry. They hid the troops on both sides of a road and set a trap. He gathered the A Troop of the 6th Michigan Cavalry and yelled, "Come on, boys, I'll lead you this time," and galloped directly into the unsuspecting rebels. As had expected, though, the rebels, more than 200 horsemen, came racing down the country road after Custer and his men. Well, he lost half of his men in the deadly rebel fire, and his horse went down, which left him on foot. He was promptly rescued by Private Norval Francis Churchill, who galloped up, shot Custer's nearest assailant, and pulled Custer up behind him. That was known as Custer's luck. Custer distinguished himself many times during the Civil War. The Battle of Gettysburg, he participated in fighting on what became known as East Cavalry Field. The Battle of Yellow Tavern in 1864, where one of his troopers mortally wounded Jeb Stuart. Custer played a major role in the Shenandoah Valley Campaign in 1864. This included the battles of 3rd Winchester and Cedar Creek, which led to his rise in the division command. Custer was promoted to Major General before he turned 25. During the closing days of the war, he relentlessly pursued the Army of Northern Virginia. On April 8, 1865, Custer's troop closed off Robert E. Lee's line of retreat at Appomattox. He received a white truce flag, which signaled Lee wanted to discuss terms of surrender. General Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia on April 9, 1865. General George Custer was present in the front lobby at Wilmer McLean's house as General Lee surrendered to General Grant. General Philip Sheridan purchased the table that the surrender was signed on and later gave it to Custer's wife, Libby. She donated it to the Smithsonian Museum after she died. Custer was married to Elizabeth Bacon, who's known as Libby. He first saw her when she was 10 years old. He had been socially introduced to her on November 1862. Her father was a judge and not very impressed with him until he became a brigadier general. After the war, he was assigned to Reconstruction duty in Texas. He was a strict disciplinarian, and his division really resented him. After he resigned his commission, he then was offered a lucrative deal to fight in Mexico, which he promptly turned down. In 1866, Custer was commissioned lieutenant colonel of the newly created 7th U.S. Cavalry and assigned to command the cavalry in the West. That following year, he took part in Winfield Hancock's expedition against the Southern Cheyenne in 1867. Custer was arrested and suspended at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, for being absent without leave. better known as AWOL. He abandoned his post to go see his wife. He was court-martialed and suspended from duty for leaving his post and mistreating soldiers. While Custer was on suspension, he had an obsession with fame and glory, acting out roles of cavalier and his lady. He may have had a theatric presence. He perfumed his cascading blonde hair with cinnamon oil.
Cinnamon.
Cinnamon, vodka.
Cinnamon.
He augmented his often specialized uniforms, such as a frontiersman's buckskin with a red tie and a large, broad-brimmed hat. Custer was restored to command by Philip Sheridan. The Army's inability to subdue the Plains Indian led him to be reinstated. In November 1868, his command surprised and destroyed the Southern Cheyenne chief Black Kettle's village on the Wishita River. Unfortunately, he had not investigated the situation at all. If he had, he would have known that they were peaceful, under a white flag, on reservation soil, and guaranteed safety from Fort Cobb. He sounded the call and killed 103 Cheyenne, including the peaceful Black Kettle, as well as women and children. This act restored Custer's reputation and convinced many Cheyenne to go to the reservation. Following the Battle of Wishita River, Custer was alleged by some to be unofficially married to Munhansetten. She was the daughter of Little Rock. Now she gave birth to a child 2 months after the battle. However, Cheyenne oral history says that she may have bore a second child fathered by Custer in late 1869. In 1874, Custer on an expedition in the Black Hills confirmed that they had discovered gold on the French Creek. This triggered the famous Black Hills Gold Rush. President Grant did try to buy the land from the Sioux, but they refused and were ordered to the reservations. Naturally, because of this, tensions were mounting between the Indians and the U.S. Treaties were broken as many moved farther west for gold. The government decided to corral the remaining Free Plains Indians. On May 1876, Custer was part of a large armed force leaving Fort Abraham Lincoln. They marched west with Brigadier General Alfred Terry. Meanwhile, the Lakota Holy Man Sitting Bull gathered Lakota, North Cheyenne, and Arapaho Indians to discuss what to do. Custer set out and discovered Sitting Bull's camp first. He was intending on attacking the camp the following day, but his presence was unfortunately known, so he decided to attack then. Unfortunately, he failed to check out the camp properly and was unaware how many Indian warriors were actually there. His misdoing is when he divided his regiment into 3 battalions, sending Major Reno to charge the village head-on, Captain Benteen to swing south to intercept any Indians fleeing in that direction, and a 3rd under his personal command to strike the village from the north. Reno's was beaten back to a tree line. Custer tried to cross the river north and was beaten back by sharpshooters. Then Crazy Horse pursued Custer and his men that numbered about 208. Now, some accounts say that there may have been as many as 3,000 Sioux in Cheyenne, but it might have realistically been about 1,500 to 2,000 warriors. These warriors were carrying superior arms to what the soldiers really had. The Battle of Little Bighorn, or as the Plains Indians called it, the Battle of Greasy Grass, was now started. This battle had become desperate and may have lasted 2 hours. The warriors now cut off the 208 soldiers that had followed Custer toward the northern reaches of their village and killed them all. Not one of the cavalry troopers lived to tell the story. However, there was one survivor, a horse named Comanche, who was badly wounded but survived the ordeal. This battle was later dubbed Custer's Last Stand. 2 days later, a scouting party from General Terry's column discovered Custer's body laying amidst a ring of dead cavalry animals where he and 40 other men had rallied for a final stand. Custer bore 2 bullet wounds, one in the left breast near his heart and one in front of his left temple. Either one could have killed him. The Sioux and the Cheyenne were victorious on that day. Custer's 18-year-old nephew Henry Reed, brothers Boston and Thomas, as well as their brother-in-law James Calhoun, also died there. Well, after his death, Custer achieved lasting fame. Custer's wife Libby, who had accompanied him to many of his frontier expeditions, did quite a bit to promote his fame with publications of several books about her late husband. She made a decent living with the books and lectures. She never remarried and died just before her 91st birthday. Custer was initially seen as a hero. It's strange how the man who led an attack on a peaceful Sioux village was remembered as a victim of a massacre. But over time, he has been harshly criticized over his role in the U.S. government's treaty violations and other injustices against Native Americans. The once gallant Indian fighter had now been transformed into a bloodthirsty Indian killer. Now many historians have now accepted that Custer was neither a spotless hero nor a villain. So this is a lesson for all of us to be careful who we turn into martyrs, make paintings and statues for. George Custer's risky, reckless, aggressive nature served him really well in the Civil War, but it was his undoing in the Indian Wars that followed. That is strange indeed. We'll keep the videos coming here on Strange History. Hey, check out our video on Aaron Burr. It's a can't miss opportunity.